Emily carefully pulled out the ribbon Ashel had intended to give to Cyan, holding it in both hands. Brian, standing nearby, noticed and asked, "Is that the ribbon Ashel wanted to give it to Cyan?" Emily nodded, yes. Brian's expression shifted to one of suspicion as he stroked his chin thoughtfully, eyeing the ribbon with a wary glance. Something about this felt off. He couldn't shake the strange feeling creeping over him. Emily, noticing his hesitation, looked confused. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Still studying the ribbon with a serious look, Brian replied, "It's just. Ashel has never sent Cyan a gift before. This doesn't add up." A mental image of Cyan and Ashel facing away from each other flashed through Brian's mind. It was just a gut feeling, but he'd always sensed that there was something more to the tension between the two brothers, something deeper than just sibling rivalry. There was a history of resentment that Cyan seemed to carry with him. Suddenly, Nana's voice broke his train of thought. "We need to move. Now." Brian turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked, noticing the shift in her demeanor. Emily remained quiet, still holding the ribbon, her mind racing. Nana stood, her body emanating a strange, suffocating energy. Her eyes had changed, now glowing with the unmistakable intensity of a dragon's gaze. "Something dangerous is coming," she said, her tone deadly serious. Brian blinked in surprise, unsure of what to make of her transformation. "Are you okay?" he asked cautiously, unsure if Nana was fully herself. Emily, for her part, was stunned. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Nana's eyes were glowing, but she had no idea what was happening. Her mind scrambled to make sense of the situation, but before she could ask more, a deafening explosion shattered the tension in the air. The wall behind them crumbled into pieces, sending dust and debris flying everywhere. Both Brian and Emily whipped around in shock. Brian immediately drew his sword, his jaw clenched in determination. "Get out of here," he shouted to Emily, his voice hard with urgency. Emily, now sweating from fear, stood frozen, her thoughts racing. What had caused the explosion? Her eyes widened as she saw the source, a massive creature stomped through the rubble. The ground shook beneath its weight as it emerged from the wreckage. It was a behemoth, a powerful high-ranking beast, its body radiating immense energy. The creature's gaze locked onto them, a primal force behind its eyes. Meanwhile, chaos erupted elsewhere in the palace. People were fleeing in every direction, scrambling to escape. Among the panicked crowd was Drenian, moving toward the exit as the sounds of destruction echoed through the halls. Drenian sprinted with every ounce of strength he had left, his breath ragged and his heart pounding. He felt the crushing weight of desperation, knowing that if he didn't make it out soon, he was as good as dead. Just moments ago, he had managed to slip past the chaos faster than anyone else, reaching the palace's main door. But to his horror, a swarm of puppets blocked the exit, standing as lifeless sentinels determined to keep anyone from escaping. As he ran, sweat poured down his face, his thoughts a frantic whirlwind. He couldn't afford to die here. He had to survive, he had to get back. The image of his maid, Lily, came unbidden to his mind. He pictured her, arms bound to a chair, battered and bruised. His pulse quickened, not out of concern but out of twisted anticipation. He wanted to see her again, and the thought fueled his survival instincts. And now, Sarika too, he wanted to see her broken, just like Lily. A manic grin spread across his face as he ran, driven by a sick thrill. Turning his head to the knight running beside him, he barked, "Are you sure the back doors are secured?" The blonde-haired knight glanced at him, uncertain. "I think so." Drenian's expression darkened. Panic surged through him. "Think so? Do you even know who I am?" he snarled, his voice laced with fury. But before he could finish his outburst, a sudden, swift movement silenced him forever. One of the puppets appeared out of nowhere, gripping Drenian's head with an iron grip. In a swift motion, the puppet's blade sliced cleanly through Drenian's skull, splitting his head in half. His body crumpled to the ground, lifeless, while the puppet gazed down with cold, emotionless eyes. The blonde knight, frozen in shock, stared at the gruesome sight, his mouth agape. Beside him, a woman let out a horrified scream, her hands flying to her face as she recoiled in terror. Drenian's severed head was flung aside by the puppet, joining the growing carnage as more of the lifeless soldiers appeared, advancing relentlessly. The knights, who had been standing firm, began trembling, their fear palpable as they realized their fate was sealed. Just then, droplets of water began to float in front of the blonde knight. Confusion flickered in his eyes as he tried to comprehend where the water had come from. The air grew thick with tension, but before anyone could react, the water droplets shimmered, gathering force. The source of the magic revealed itself. Alice had arrived. Alice drew her sword swiftly, summoning her aqua explosion ability. With a fierce swing, a powerful wave of water surged from her blade, crashing into the advancing puppets and sending them flying backward. Her eyes remained sharp, focused on the enemy as she issued a command to Luna. Now, strike! Luna nodded, raising her hand toward the airborne puppets. She unleashed her freeze spell, and tendrils of ice erupted forward, closing the distance in an instant. The puppets, suspended in the air and unable to evade, were hit directly by the icy surge. The freezing power enveloped them, their bodies locking into place as they were encased in ice. With a graceful leap, Alice landed atop the newly formed ice, surveying the battlefield. Luna, having exhausted much of her energy, collapsed to her knees, panting heavily. The surrounding knights, who had been paralyzed by fear moments before, stared in awe at the ice-covered puppets. They whispered among themselves, astonished at how quickly the monsters had been subdued. Alice turned to face the knights, introducing herself with a calm yet authoritative tone. "I'm Alice Vert, and this isn't over. Protect the princess, no matter what." Meanwhile, Luna's strength had completely waned, and her breathing became labored. Aaron rushed to her side, her expression full of concern. The knight accompanying Aaron glanced at Luna and asked if she was all right. Aaron reassured him, though her eyes betrayed her own worry. Luna, visibly drained, gave Aaron a weak but reassuring smile. Her trembling hand reached out as she softly spoke, "Don't worry about me. I'll recover soon." Aaron knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on Luna's back. Her brow furrowed in concern as she asked, "Are you sure?" With a tired voice and a determined look, Luna nodded. "You need to leave, another attack is coming soon," she warned. Aaron glanced down, her mind racing, yet she remained silent, absorbing the weight of Luna's words. The tension in the air thickened as they prepared for the next wave of danger. Princess Aaron had no clue what was unfolding as the knights around her quickly assumed a defensive formation. The blonde-haired knight took charge, rallying the others to protect the princess at all costs. His voice was steady as he issued commands, ensuring every knight was positioned to shield the nobles and their leader from danger. Amidst this preparation, Alice gracefully descended from her elevated position, surprising the knights as she moved to assist. Without hesitation, she turned to the guardian knights. "Raise barriers," she ordered, her voice resolute. "Focus on protecting the nobles. Hold them off until we can finish this." The knights exchanged glances, but the authority in her tone left no room for question. They obeyed. She then addressed the royal knights. "Guard the princess. Support her if she falters." They followed her instructions in silence. Gripping her sword tightly, Alice walked towards the growing swarm of puppets, her body radiating with energy. Her eyes narrowed in determination, knowing that she would give everything she had to stop these creatures. But as she fought, it became clear that no matter how many she cut down, more continued to emerge, seemingly drawn to their location like moths to a flame. The ground was already littered with the broken remains of countless puppets, yet the tide showed no signs of stopping. Princess Aaron's pendant, which began emitting a sinister energy, a malevolent force that pulsed in tune with the puppets. The red jewel embedded in the pendant was the source of the evil energy, an invisible force that could not be seen by the naked eye. Meanwhile, a distant rumble echoed through the palace as the behemoth, a massive ranking beast, slammed its feet against the ground. The force of its stomp shattered the earth beneath it, and its presence alone sent a wave of dread through the area. Brian stood his ground, both hands gripping his sword tightly, preparing for the inevitable clash. Emily, trembling in fear, clung to his shoulder, her voice shaky as she begged him to do something. "Stay behind me," Brian commanded, his voice calm but his eyes never leaving the behemoth. The creature lumbered toward them, its body pulsing with immense power. Brian's thoughts raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. A high-ranking monster appearing in the palace could only mean one thing: something far more sinister was happening, just as Cyan had predicted. Emily clung to Brian's back, her body trembling in fear. She had always relied on Cyan to protect her, but now, Brian knew it was up to him. He had to be the one to keep them safe. Despite the tension building within him, he forced himself to stay calm, hiding any sign of weakness. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead as the reality of the situation set in. He was their only defense. Feeling Emily's grip tighten, Brian heard her soft voice whisper, "I believe in you." Her words made his heart race, and his face flushed bright red, though he tried to stay focused. Ahead of them, the behemoth drew closer, its massive jaws opening wide, preparing to strike. With determination, Brian gripped his sword in one hand, his knuckles white from the pressure. "Stay close," he instructed, not daring to look back as the behemoth lifted its enormous paw and sent a devastating attack their way. Just before it landed, Brian swung his sword with all his might, meeting the beast's blow and managing to deflect it. Relief washed over him for a moment, and he couldn't help but grin, thinking they might actually survive this. But the behemoth wasn't done. It unleashed a relentless series of strikes, each more powerful than the last. Brian met each blow, his sword vibrating with the force of the impacts, but he was tiring. The creature's overwhelming strength began to push him back, and soon, he was thrown off balance. His arms felt heavy, his breath came in ragged gasps, but he forced himself to stand his ground. Emily's voice cracked with fear as she cried out, "Are you okay?" "Yes," he replied through gritted teeth, though his body was trembling from the strain. "Don't worry, I'll protect you." But even as he said it, doubt crept into his mind. He could feel his strength fading. Suddenly, in a blur of motion, the behemoth was right in front of them, its mouth wide open, ready to deliver the final blow. Brian's heart raced as panic set in. This was it. His mind raced with thoughts of failure. "Cyan. I'm sorry," he muttered under his breath, bracing for the end. Then, out of nowhere, a shadow moved above them. In a split second, something struck the behemoth's head with immense force, slamming the creature into the ground. The impact shattered the earth beneath it, leaving cracks where the massive body lay. Brian stood frozen, staring in disbelief. Emily peeked out from behind him, her eyes wide with shock. Before them stood a figure with large, majestic wings, descending gracefully from the sky. Both Brian and Emily were left speechless, watching as their savior touched down. The behemoth, once so unstoppable, lay motionless, defeated by this mysterious winged figure. Nana stood before them, her body radiating with intense energy, the behemoth lying unconscious at her feet from the sheer force of her attack. Brian and Emily exchanged bewildered glances, struggling to believe that the person in front of them could be Nana. Her eyes shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and a warm smile spread across her face as she turned to look at them. Outside the palace, the moon had fully risen, casting a pale light over the chaos. Inside, the sound of clashing metal filled the air as the puppets, swords drawn, charged toward Alice and the others. Princess Erin's gaze was sharp with determination as she clenched her teeth and raised her hands, summoning golden magic circles in front of her. Knights nearby struggled to hold the line, one managing to cut a puppet in half with a swift strike of his sword. Alice moved with blinding speed, her sword slicing through the puppets with lethal precision. She dispatched several before landing back on the ground, her body worn and face scratched from the relentless battle. Looking around, her expression grew serious. This fight wasn't going to end unless something changed. Whoever orchestrated this had planned meticulously, and Alice sensed the knights were beginning to tire, just like she was. Amid the chaos, a knight managed to strike one of the puppets across the face, causing its mask to fly off and fall to the ground. Alice's heart skipped a beat as she caught sight of the creature's true face beneath the mask, an undead, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. These puppets were resurrected by dark magic. The once lifeless corpse let out a bone-chilling roar, its grip tightening around its weapon as it resumed the attack. Alice quickly understood that these weren't ordinary enemies. They were reanimated corpses, bound by some sinister force. Fighting through the horde, her sword slashed through the air, cutting down the puppets one by one. Her mind raced for a solution, something strong enough to counteract dark magic. As her blade tore through another puppet, the name of the god of light, Lumendal, flashed through her thoughts. Light magic. That was the key to overcoming the darkness surrounding them. Without wasting time, Alice focused her thoughts, determined to invoke Lumendal's light to vanquish the dark magic that had brought these creatures back to life. Lumendal's light magic held immense power, capable of obliterating the undead with minimal effort. If someone could harness that light in a spell, their chances of victory would significantly increase. As the chaos of battle raged around her, Alice quickly deduced that this was their best option. Amid the ongoing fight, Princess Erin raised her hands, channeling her energy into golden magic circles that formed a protective barrier around the knights. Alice caught her eye and urgently called out, asking Erin to infuse her sword with mana. However, Erin hesitated, explaining that doing so would disrupt the knights' protective spell, weakening their defense. Just then, two puppets emerged from the shadows, but a knight swiftly turned and dispatched them effortlessly with his sword. He reassured Princess Erin not to fret about the threats around them, flashing her a cheerful smile as he urged her to trust in their ability to hold the line a little longer. Surprised by his confidence, Erin regarded him with wide eyes, feeling a spark of hope. With newfound determination, she decided to go ahead and empower Alice's sword. Channeling her energy, she invoked the Blessing Light ability, creating a golden aura that enveloped Alice. As the mana coursed through the sword, Alice felt its power surge and couldn't help but smile in response to the encouraging energy. A bead of sweat trickled down her cheek, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. She realized that combining their two types of mana was challenging, yet she was optimistic. If she infused the spell with spiritual magic, the flow of energy could become seamless, like butter gliding over a hot pan. As the puppet steadily advanced, Alice gripped her sword with both hands, focusing intently. Suddenly, a spirit, a woman formed of shimmering water, materialized above her, smiling down at her. Though uncertainty lingered, Alice felt a surge of courage. She was willing to take the risk, ready to unleash the combined power of light and spirit against their foes. Corpses littered the ground as Cyan inspected them carefully. Among the dead, he identified marionettes and mandrakes, a clear sign that someone else was already aiding Ashel. At that moment, he recalled when Boris had first sworn loyalty to Ashel. Karam, who had also been examining the scene, noticed traces of necromantic dark magic and was left stunned. Ancient magic like this, wielded by a human in their era, was almost unheard of. Cyan chimed in, mentioning a familiar tactic often employed by the mysterious figure, the rapid enhancement of monsters using daze stones. He explained that the mana from these stones naturally drew in beasts, empowering them. Karam confirmed that she sensed mana from these stones coming from a particular direction, leading Cyan to make a quick decision. The entire battlefield had turned into a slaughterhouse, and Cyan prepared to move, but he had something to take care of first. He decided he needed to change before setting out. Meanwhile, Alice was locked in an intense battle. She had called forth a female spirit with flowing blue hair. Lunav, witnessing the scene, hesitated, recognizing the figure. "Is that the spirit Marion?" she wondered aloud, surprised that Alice had managed to summon such a powerful entity, even temporarily. She suspected Alice had used light-type mana, but she knew mana types couldn't normally be combined. The strain on Alice was evident, and Lunav feared she wouldn't last long in this unstable state. "We have to stop her," Lunav said with urgency, anxiety evident in her voice. "If this continues, Alice's body won't be able to handle the pressure." Right now, Alice was radiating a dangerous blue aura, her body merging with the spirit's immense power. Through telepathy, Spirit Marion spoke to Alice, questioning why she was pushing herself so far. "I had no other choice," Alice responded, her voice strained but resolute. "It's the only way to defeat the monsters." Spirit Marion's tone softened as she expressed sorrow. "Such a cruel fate," she murmured, "especially for one blessed by Fruina as you were." Spirit Marion found the monsters utterly repulsive. With a wave of her hand, she unleashed a powerful force that obliterated their bodies in an instant. Aaron stood in shock, amazed at the sheer strength Marion displayed with just a simple motion. Yet Lunav's face remained tense, she knew it wasn't over. The monsters were already starting to rise again, undeterred by the spirit's power. "Alice, stop. You'll die if you keep going." Aaron shouted, her voice filled with desperation. But Alice understood the stakes. If she backed down now, the situation would only worsen. She had to finish this. Summoning her resolve, she activated Spirit King's authority, Rangomient, a skill of immense power. But before she could fully unleash it, a hand grasped hers. Alice froze, as did Spirit Marion. Even Aaron and Lunav were taken aback. None of them had sensed the man approaching. Cyan in a mask, he could easily be mistaken for another marionette, yet the aura he exuded was entirely different, unsettling. Alice, still reeling from the shock, also noticed the ominous black fog that began to swirl around her as his grip tightened. She couldn't move, her strength slipping away, overtaken by this stranger's dark presence. The man's hold on Alice was unrelenting, and worry crept into her mind as the fog threatened to consume her. Suddenly, Spirit Marion broke the silence. "Goodbye, Alice," she said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "This is where our journey ends." Her parting words were filled with bittersweet wisdom, reminding Alice that farewells, though painful, could also bring peace. With that, Spirit Marion vanished. Alice felt an overwhelming weakness, as if all her energy had been drained in an instant. She wondered if it was the black fog that had caused this, as her body became heavy and unresponsive. In her final moments with the spirit, she heard Marion's parting message, "Remember, Fruina will always welcome you with open arms." And then, the spirit was gone. Meanwhile, Aaron turned to Lunav, her voice laced with urgency. "What's happening?" she asked. Lunav explained that the masked man had disrupted the flow of mana, cutting off the spirit's manifestation. Yet even with her explanation, there was still uncertainty in her mind. Was this masked figure even human? As the next wave of monsters surged forward, Alice knew they stood no chance. It was over. But then, something unexpected happened. The monsters turned their attention to the masked man, launching their attack, but he dispatched them with terrifying ease. Alice's eyes widened in disbelief, this mysterious figure was on their side. He continued to cut down the monsters effortlessly. In the midst of battle, the masked man paused for a brief moment, surveying the battlefield. He realized something: if he stepped back, even slightly, the monsters would immediately be drawn to the group surrounding the princess. It was as if some unseen force was pulling them toward her, irresistibly strong. Cyan, the masked figure, turned to Karam with a question. Do you sense any unusual mana from anyone here? Karam hesitated for a moment before clarifying, you mean aside from Lunav? Cyan nodded, brushing off the mention of Lunav. Yes, Lunav's always like that. Karam considered his question carefully, then pointed to the princess's necklace. I've sensed a strange, monstrous mana coming from that necklace. Cyan's expression hardened as he formulated his next move. I'll need your help to close the distance quickly, he requested. Karam groaned in response, her voice laced with frustration. You only ever call on me when it's something like this. At that moment, Cyan initiated his spell, Creation, Space, Fog Domain. A crimson mist rapidly expanded across the battlefield, blanketing everything. It resembled a domain, warping the environment around them. The royal knights were immediately on edge, warning everyone to stay vigilant as they had no idea what the fog was capable of. It felt as though they had been transported to an entirely different dimension. Monsters, particularly the marionettes, continued charging toward Eren. But as they crossed into the black fog, something unexpected happened. They halted. Alice watched in shock as the fog began to devour the marionettes, their forms slowly dissolving until they completely vanished into the mist. Silence fell across the battlefield, as if the monstrous onslaught had never occurred. Eren stood stunned, her gaze locked on the masked man. Did he kill all of them? She murmured to herself, still trying to comprehend the overwhelming power he had just displayed. A thought nagged at her, who exactly was this mysterious masked figure? Before anyone could answer, Lunav suddenly collapsed to the ground. Eren rushed to her side, calling out, Lunav, stay with me. She had no idea that a black fog was already creeping up behind her. Without warning, Cyan appeared behind Eren. She let out a startled scream, and the royal knights sprang into action, weapons drawn. Cyan moved faster than they could react, pressing a dagger to Eren's neck. Release her, one of the royal knights shouted in alarm, but Eren's eyes widened as she caught a fleeting sense of recognition. There was something disturbingly familiar about him. Cyan's next move was swift and precise. Instead of harming the princess, he drove his blade into her necklace. Panic spread among the knights and onlookers, they feared that the princess was finished. One of the royal knights lunged at the masked man, but he missed his mark. Cyan had already vanished, disappearing into the fog in an instant. Confused and disoriented, the knight scanned the area, his vision obscured by the dense black mist. But then, as if stepping out of nowhere, Cyan reappeared, this time standing next to Lunav. Eren's eyes widened in horror as she saw the masked man next to Lunav. No, she screamed, her voice echoing through the air. Get away from her! Fueled by panic, she unleashed her skill, God Stinger, sending a powerful attack toward Cyan. But he was ready. As her attack closed in, Cyan's body dissolved into a thick fog, allowing the strike to pass harmlessly through him. A calm but unfamiliar voice broke through the tension, cutting through the chaos. It was Cyan. I'm not here to harm you, he assured them, his tone firm yet non-threatening. I destroyed the jewel so the monsters would stop being drawn to her, he explained. Eren, still processing everything, looked at him in confusion. The necklace, the one my brother gave me? It's been causing all of this, she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Cyan nodded. Yes, the mana from the necklace was attracting the creatures. You need to leave through the front gates. I've already cleared the way for you. As the tension in the air began to ease, everyone noticed that the world around them was returning to normal, the fog lifting, the twisted reality fading. A royal knight hurried to Eren's side, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt, princess? He asked, his concern clear. I'm fine, Eren reassured him, though her mind was racing. What about Alice and Lunav? Are they all right? They're okay, came the response. Alice, still shaken but steady, stepped forward. We should follow his advice and leave through the gates, she suggested. Right now, getting everyone to safety is the priority. Though questions about the masked man lingered in her mind, she knew this wasn't the time to dwell on them. Meanwhile, Lunav's eyes gleamed with an eerie glow. She whispered a name softly, Cyan. It seemed she had pieced together the true identity of their mysterious savior. In another part of the kingdom, the behemoth lay dead, its massive body lifeless and its blood pooling across the floor, creating a grotesque scene. Nana stood before the fallen beast, while nearby, Emily clung to Brian, visibly shaken by the gruesome sight. What's going on with that kid? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Brian, equally stunned, shook his head. I've never seen her like this before, he admitted. Nana's true form had been revealed, parts of her body now unmistakably those of a dragon. She hovered in the air, radiating a dark, oppressive energy that filled the room. In the back of Cyan's mind, an old rumor resurfaced, one he had heard in his previous life. It was about the infamous Banquet of Blood, a brutal event that had claimed many lives. According to the whispers, the mastermind behind the massacre had been none other than Erin Severus, the fifth princess of the Empire, driven mad by her lust for power. And at the heart of it all had been the Days Stone. Cyan couldn't help but suspect that Ashel or Lunel had been the ones responsible for giving it to her. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one.